On Tuesday, April 7th at exactly 8 p.m. Eastern Time. This was the final deadline Trump set for Iran. The entire Middle East, the whole world, was holding its breath. Just 90 minutes before this moment, Trump suddenly posted on social media announcing a 2-week ceasefire. A president who, just 48 hours earlier, was saying that an entire civilization would perish tonight and never return, suddenly pressed the pause button like this. What exactly happened during those 90 minutes? Today, I want to thoroughly review this entire incident from beginning to end. Every key moment has details worth examining closely. If this is your first time visiting Fang Wei's Perspective, welcome to subscribe to my channel. Click the little bell so you won't miss any in-depth analysis. To understand this dramatic 90-minute reversal, you first need to get the timeline straight because this isn't the first time the wolf has come. It's the third. The first time was on March 21st. Trump gave Iran a list of demands. Open the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours, or else he would bomb their power plants. What is the Strait of Hormuz? It's the world's most critical oil choke point. 1/5 of the global oil supply passes through this waterway that's less than 23 kilometers wide. For a long time, Iran has used the threat of closing the strait as its ultimate diplomatic weapon. Trump bluntly said, "If you dare to close it, I'll turn off your lights." So what happened? Just 12 hours before the deadline, Trump posted again, saying that he had a very good and productive conversation with Iran and that the military strike would be paused for 5 days. At the same time, the U.S. delivered a 15-point action list to Iran through Pakistan as an intermediary, serving as the framework for a peace agreement. This list required Iran to commit to abandoning nuclear weapons, hand over highly enriched uranium, restrict its missile capabilities, and stop funding proxy armed groups. Ensuring the security and openness of the strait, with the U.S. considering lifting sanctions in exchange and assisting in the development of civilian nuclear energy, this was the bottom line that the U.S. put on the table. The second time was on March 26th. 5 days had passed and Trump lost his patience, issuing a second ultimatum, warning Iran to get serious quickly or it would be too late. That very night, Iran made a gesture by allowing 10 oil tankers filled with crude oil to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. At Iran's request, Trump once again paused military strikes, this time granting a 10-day buffer. I noticed a detail. Each time, Iran made the minimum concession just before the deadline to gain the maximum amount of time as a buffer. This is Tehran's diplomatic routine. The strategy is to stall, drag things out as much as possible until the other side gets tired, distracted, or something else comes up. This is a tactic they've been using for decades. The third time was April 5th on Easter. That day, Trump raised his tone to the highest level. The statement he posted read like a declaration of war: "Open the strait or you will live in hell." The deadline was set for Tuesday, April 7th at 8 p.m. This time, very few people believed Trump would back down again. The White House's stance was extremely tough. The Pentagon's B-2 stealth bombers had already been deployed to the Diego Garcia base in the Indian Ocean. This was not a bluff. Before we continue, I want to ask you a question. What do you think is the fundamental reason Iran agreed to a ceasefire this time? A. They were intimidated by the real military threat from the U.S. military and were afraid of fighting. B. They were pressured by Beijing and had no choice but to back down. C. It's a delaying tactic. Iran is trying to buy time. D. There is internal division within Iran. The hardliners have lost their voice. Leave your answer in the comments and I'll share my thoughts in a moment. After the ceasefire was announced, the situation did not calm down. Instead, an information war broke out. Right after Trump announced the ceasefire, Iranian state media was quick to release a so-called 10-point plan that was claimed to be the basis for negotiations. The contents of this plan left everyone familiar with Iranian diplomacy utterly stunned. Listen and see if you feel the same way I do. The plan states that the United States must guarantee never to invade Iran, must recognize Iran's sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, must require Israel to withdraw its troops from Lebanon, the U.S. military must completely withdraw from the Middle East, and the United States must also compensate Iran for war damages. At the same time, Iran retains full rights to uranium enrichment. How is this a ceasefire agreement? This is clearly a declaration of victory for Iran. Both CNN and the New York Times followed up with reports on this version. Conservative circles in the United States immediately exploded, and then White House spokesperson Leavitt came out to speak using a rather direct tone. This proposal is fundamentally unserious and unacceptable. Trump threw it straight into the trash. Trump himself was even more blunt, saying this is completely fake, a rumor spread by a fake news website from Nigeria. So what is the real document on the negotiating table? Vice President Vance came out to clarify. He said that in fact there are 3 different versions of the proposal circulating out there, each from a different point in time. The first version is for Iran's domestic propaganda, to make their own people feel that they have not surrendered. The second version is the real basis for the negotiations. This is the direction Trump said could be negotiated. The third version is fake information deliberately released by certain fringe figures within Iran to confuse the public, perhaps to sabotage the negotiation process, or perhaps as a tool in internal factional struggles. I think this detail is very important. He revealed a reality. The Iranian government has never spoken with a single voice. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the Supreme Leader's Office, the Foreign Ministry, Parliament, and the religious conservatives, each faction has its own agenda and uses external negotiations as a means for internal power struggles. Negotiators must be clear that in Tehran, it is not just one person speaking. It is a noisy marketplace of voices. Now we come to the most crucial part of today's discussion. On the afternoon of Tuesday, April 7th, just as the countdown to the U.S. ultimatum entered its final hours, Beijing made its move. The New York Times, citing 3 Iranian officials, reported that at the last moment, the Chinese Communist Party put pressure on Tehran, demanding that Iran show flexibility and ease tensions. After the ceasefire was announced, Trump was interviewed by Agence France-Presse. The reporter asked him directly whether China had helped bring Iran back to the negotiating table. Trump's answer was, "I heard that they did." White House spokesperson Leavitt also confirmed this. The highest levels of the U.S. and Chinese governments engaged in direct dialogue on this issue. Why did Beijing do this? Was it because Xi Jinping suddenly became a lover of peace? Of course not. Beijing's push for a ceasefire was not for world peace at all, but purely a matter of self-interest. 2 numbers are enough to explain everything. First, who buys 90% of Iran's oil exports? China. Second, through which route does over 40% of China's oil imports pass? The Strait of Hormuz. If the strait were to be closed, China's factories would shut down, oil tanks would run dry, and the economy would take a direct hit. Beijing's push for a ceasefire is about saving itself, not Iran, and certainly not the world. But the question is, while Beijing is holding out an olive branch with one hand, what is it doing with the other? Shipping tracking data shows that several vessels departing from Gaolan port in Zhuhai, Guangdong, are carrying sodium perchlorate, a key ingredient in ballistic missile propellants. These chemical precursors are being shipped to Iran, helping Iran restore its missile production capabilities that have been damaged. According to a Reuters report, ESMIC has supplied chip manufacturing equipment to the Iranian military. A report by the Atlantic Council goes even further, directly pointing out that Chinese-made or Western components transferred to China have been found inside Iranian drones used to attack U.S. forces. This is the CCP's usual verified old logic. I tell you to stop, but you continue to rely on me. I have you chained up, and at the same time, I keep supporting you. This two-faced approach is actually Beijing's real geopolitical business model. After the ceasefire was announced, Trump posted 2 messages in a row, and when you look at them together, they are quite thought-provoking. The first one was directed at Iran, where he painted a picture of the future. If Iran agrees to give up nuclear weapons and stop uranium enrichment, the United States would not only help remove the remnants of nuclear facilities, but also lift sanctions and offer tariff concessions. Iran would be welcomed back into the international economic system. That's the carrot. The second message was aimed at Beijing. Trump wrote that any country providing military weapons to Iran, all goods it sells to the United States will immediately be subject to a 50% tariff. No exceptions whatsoever. No exemptions at all. The target of this post is clear to everyone. It's China, Trump. While praising Beijing for promoting a ceasefire, he also threatened Beijing not to continue providing military aid to Iran. These 2 actions placed side by side send a carefully crafted message. You can play the mediator, but you cannot be an arms dealer at the same time. Pick one. At this moment, Beijing is actually facing triple pressure. First, the U.S. Treasury Department's sanctions waiver for China's small refineries will expire on April 19th. After it expires, continuing to purchase Iranian oil will expose them to U.S. secondary sanctions, which is a direct blow to China's private refining industry. Second, the threat of a 50% tariff on arms sales is hanging overhead, so the Chinese leadership must carefully weigh the consequences. Third, in mid-May, Xi Jinping will host Trump in Beijing, which will be the main stage for a major diplomatic event. Beijing needs to maintain a relatively stable situation before the summit, rather than having the Middle East in turmoil everywhere. I believe that this time Beijing has cooperated with the United States, but not because China-US relations have improved. Rather, under triple pressure, they calculated their interests and found that pushing Iran to temporarily ceasefire is much less costly than bearing the consequences of sanctions. Finally, I want to say that this ceasefire is far from the end. On the very night after the ceasefire was announced, Trump posted again. He said that all U.S. naval vessels, aircraft, military personnel, along with additional ammunition and weapons, would continue to remain around Iran until a truly reached agreement is fully observed. He also said that if the agreement is not upheld, the shooting starts, and it will be bigger, fiercer, and stronger than anything anyone has ever seen. This is not diplomatic rhetoric. This is telling Tehran that the ceasefire is only a pause, not an end. The guns are still aimed. The fuse hasn't been pulled yet. Next, there are three key points I'm most focused on. First, the negotiations in Islamabad. Vance and Kushner are leading the U.S. delegation to Pakistan, and Iran's Foreign Minister Arakchi is expected to attend. This will be the first real testing ground for substantive negotiations. Second, the navigational status of the Strait of Hormuz. Keeping the strait open is the minimum prerequisite for the ceasefire to hold. Any sign of tightening could trigger a new round of crisis. Third, Beijing's next move. Will the Chinese Communist Party continue to play the role of mediator, or will it keep quietly providing support to Iran? Is it possible to do both at the same time? Trump has already made his bottom line clear. In my view, we are witnessing a multi-layered chess game centered on the nuclear issue, with the oil strait as the battlefield and the China-US rivalry as the backdrop. Iran is an important piece on the board, but it is not the only one. Beijing wants to be the rider, yet is also being treated as a chess piece by others. This kind of dilemma will become increasingly apparent in the coming months. Returning to the interactive question from earlier, my answer is this. I believe option C, the possibility of a delaying tactic, always exists, but this time it is compounded by option B. Beijing is indeed under real pressure. Of course, this is my judgment and does not represent the only interpretation. I'm very interested in your views, so feel free to share them in the comments section. If you found today's analysis helpful, please like and share it with friends who you think need to see these things clearly. I'm Fang Wei from Fang Wei's Perspective. See you next time.